It is divisional round game day. The Baltimore Ravens take on the Buffalo Bills for the chance to go to the AFC Championship game. We talk about a full game preview as well. This is why Baltimore is taking some major advantages into the game. All that and more coming up next on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into another edition of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for being here today on this game day edition of the show, making Locked On Ravens both a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We're free and available for you on all podcasting platforms. That includes in video form, where you can like and subscribe to the channel on YouTube, and also in audio form, where you can follow along and subscribe wherever you get your podcast. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens show, so Monday through Friday, we have regularly scheduled content coming out on all those days. Plus, of course, bonus episodes like this one on game days. We go live after every Ravens game, which we will do again later tonight, because the Ravens and the Bills have a divisional round showdown. Today's game day edition of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by PrizePicks. Go to PrizePicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Nerves are certainly setting in, but it's also excitement. It is intrigue. So many different emotions that I'm going through. I'm sure everybody watching and listening going through some of those exact same emotions. This is all, it's all or nothing. It's all for the marbles to go to the championship game, as we now know, to play the Kansas City Chiefs officially in Arrowhead, as they took care of business with a little bit of help against the Houston Texans in their divisional round matchup. So this game between Buffalo and Baltimore is going to be massive for both teams. I mean, obviously from a win and go home perspective, but also just for a narratives perspective, we've talked about that. So we'll be diving into some key advantages the Ravens have over the Bills. I truly do think that they have some. Obviously the Bills have some as well. So we'll look at it from both sides of the equation. We'll also talk about final predictions. We'll dive into some players to watch, some matchups to watch, and a lot more. So thank you again to everybody who is here with me today, whether you are actually in Buffalo going to the game up there and representing Ravens flock. Shout out to you for going up there. If you're just in Baltimore, though, shout out to you as well for representing, whether you're going to a tailgate or a watch party, you're getting ready for the game, watching it at home, anywhere you're watching or listening. Really appreciate you checking in with me here today on the show. Now, again, I mentioned matchups. I mentioned advantages. Let's talk about the big advantage everybody is talking about, and I think it's the biggest storyline to watch in the entire game, at least one of them, and that is the Ravens run offense versus the Buffalo run defense, the way that Buffalo plays defense. For those who don't know, or maybe you haven't watched any Ravens coverage this week, or just it's slipped past you, Buffalo's defense is smaller compared to, the average defense, I would say, in terms of what you need to stop this Ravens rushing attack. They have dudes on that defense. They have quality playmakers at all three levels. We've talked about in week 4 how the Ravens didn't face 3 of Buffalo's top defenders. And obviously the Ravens are a much different team as well. But they like to play in sub packages, nickel packages. They like to play base. Their identity is not putting big guys on the field. They like to have that extra athleticism, I guess the speed. And obviously with the way the NFL is, you're going to play more corners. But this is not what Baltimore does. Baltimore is we're going to run it down your throat type offense. And obviously the passing offense has been worked into that. And it's a pick your poison type deal with the run and the pass, much more so than when the team had Greg Roman as their offensive coordinator. But I digress. Point is, Buffalo's going to have to change a lot of their defensive identity and philosophy this week. And it's a week for them to go and change all of that. That's a major deal to me. I don't think that aspect of it is being talked about enough. It's being talked about the Buffalo's a light defense. It's being talked about that the Ravens are a dominant ground attack. But what's not being talked about is if you have to change all that up and you are uncomfortable playing that style of defense, the Bills have to get comfortable real quick with playing that style of defense. And I'm not saying they can't. I'm not saying they can't. They have no shot at stopping Baltimore's run offense. There are ways they can. But that begins with winning quickly at the line, not letting Derrick Henry get to the second level, keying in on your assignment, gap discipline, locating where the ball is. And that's stuff that Buffalo can do. But sometimes it's just matchup based and there's nothing you can do or sometimes it's another factor that goes into the equation, and you just can't do anything about it. Buffalo's going to put up a fight here. And remember, Derrick Henry went wild on this Buffalo defense the last time these two teams faced off for 199 rushing yards. And again, Buffalo's missing some pieces, and I'm sure that that's been a big emphasis, the major emphasis for Buffalo this entire week. That was embarrassing for them. They don't want that to happen again. If I'm Sean McDermott, I am telling my guys, hey, let's be a little prideful with this, right? That was embarrassing the first time around, right? We got our butts kicked. Like, let's go out there and let's prove a point. Let's send a message. But Buffalo's run defense on the season is 19th in the league in terms of net yards per attempt. And that's why, again, if you're new to the show, new to the channel, I don't go off of total yards. I go off of yards per attempt because, long story short, if there's a team with 100 rushing attempts and 500 rushing attempts, the team with 500 rushing attempts is obviously going to have more yards. But if that team with 500 rushing attempts averages 2 yards a carry and the team with 100 rushing attempts averages 7 yards a carry, the team with 100 carries is the better rushing team. So Buffalo gives up 4.5 yards per carry on the ground. That's not a great number. And even though the Bills are a top 10 in terms of giving up rushing touchdowns and top 12 in terms of yards, that also has a lot to do with game flow and game script. On a carry per carry basis, the Bills rank in the bottom half of the league in run defense. And you can have guys like Ed Oliver and Matt Milano and, Terrell Bernard and all these players out there. But if you can't match the physicality for a full 60 minutes, and we saw the Ravens game plan against Pittsburgh, if you can't stop that, they are going to go to that well over and over and over again. They're going to use 6 offensive linemen with Josh Jones. They're going to roll Patrick Ricard out there and get really heavy on you. The 2 tight end, 3 tight end sets. Charlie Kohler has been a really good blocker for them this season. They're going to roll that out. And with Zay Flowers being doubtful for this game, again, at the time of this recording, there's been no new news on Zay. It's been just, he has a chance to play according to John Harbaugh, but in reality, if the Ravens advance to the AFC Championship game, I think that's the more likely start point for Zay, is him being available for that game, but not this one. But that will probably incline the Ravens to run the ball even more or use heavier personnel packages. If Buffalo cannot get a hat on a hat, be physical with those matchups, it could be a very long day for them. So again, the Bills have to be up for that challenge, but I think it's a major advantage that the Ravens do have because Buffalo's run offense is also really good. These are 2 great run offenses. But Baltimore's defense is much more physical, in my opinion, and is much more well-equipped to stop the running game than the Bills' defense is. And the other part of this, too, which I don't think this has actually been talked about a ton, but when you talk about some conversions, and I've kind of mentioned this on the show and on other shows I've gone on this week, the Bills are not a good third down defense. During the regular season, they gave up 43.8% on third down. That percentage, that's 29th in the NFL. So essentially a bottom 5 third down defense. The Ravens' third down offense is 3rd in the league, 48.2% of their opportunities they convert on. Getting off the field for a defense on third down is so important for multiple different reasons. Obviously, giving your offense the ball back, limiting the points that the opposing offense scores, also from just a morale perspective. Getting off the field on third down is really important just to keep your confidence up. But the Bills haven't been able to do that a lot this season. And when you talk about this Bills offense, it is extremely high-powered, much like Baltimore's, right? These are 2 great offenses, 2 great quarterbacks. But if you want to throw those out and just say, all right, Bills offense, Ravens offense, it's a wash, if you believe that. But we're just going to use it for this exercise's sake. If you just throw those out, I have much more confidence in the Baltimore defense based off of what we've seen over these last 2 months than in Buffalo's defense. Because, the Bills have had really fun games against like the Rams and the Lions, who are now eliminated from the playoffs, by the way. But the defense is what? They gave up like 900 total yards and almost 100 points in those games. I can't remember the exact stats, but this defense, they have talent on it, but it's just a bad matchup, in my opinion. So sometimes you just run into a team that's a bad matchup for you, and sometimes you can overcome that. The Bills still have a shot in this game. But I do like Baltimore from those aspects. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll talk a little more about some matchups for both sides of the ball here. We're getting into more percentages, conversion stats, and a lot more. Stay tuned. A lot to get to on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by PrizePicks. It's playoff time, and if you're like me, you want to make the most of these final weeks of football action. That's where PrizePicks comes in. If you love football and want a chance to win real money while watching the games, PrizePicks is the place for you. It's the best way to determine your sports opinions into cash with daily fantasy player projections. With PrizePicks, you simply pick more or less on player stats like total passing yards or rushing touchdowns for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your money. You can make your picks in less than 60 seconds, whether you're looking for a flex play to boost your payout or want to cash out quickly. PrizePicks has got you covered. With over 10 million members and billions of winnings, it's clear that people are loving this platform. I've been playing for a while now, and I'm having a blast this week. I'm on Lamar Jackson, more than 230 passing yards, and Derrick Henry, more than one touchdown. So easy to use, and I love how fast the payouts are. Seriously, I've gotten paid out in as little as 15 minutes. My picks hit. Plus, the weekly promos like Taco Tuesday discounts add even more value to my lineups. Here's a special offer for Locked On NFL listeners. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. That's PrizePicks. Run your game. Download the app today. Use code Locked On NFL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks. Run your game. We're back. Our second segment, Locked On Ravens. Kevin Ostraker here with you still on this Sunday edition episode. First time the Ravens have played on a Sunday since they played the Giants coming out of their bye week. It's been a while. We've had a bunch of Saturday games, a Wednesday game in there. So yeah, it's been a little bit since Baltimore's actually had a Sunday game that is being played. And it's, obviously the standard, but feels a little different because we haven't had it as much. So Ravens and Bills, 6:30 p.m. Eastern time, should be an absolutely great game. You have two high-powered offenses, and I just think a really good matchup overall. As I've mentioned, I feel like the matchup does favor Baltimore, but the winner of this game gets to go on to Arrowhead to play the Kansas City Chiefs. And after the final whistle of this game, we'll be live here on the YouTube channel on Locked On Ravens. And obviously, once the YouTube live is done, it'll be available for playback in video form and in audio form as well. Some other things that I'm looking at for this game in particular, because obviously so much has been made about the Ravens run game and, how Baltimore should be able to punish the Bills for that mismatch. I see a lot of people asking, okay, well, what about this Bills offense? How can the Bills offense capitalize on some weaknesses of the Ravens defense? And to be honest with you, I mean, there haven't really been a lot of Ravens weaknesses on the defensive side of the ball ever since that second Cincinnati game. But I think that everybody is identifying Brandon Stephens as that weak point of the defense. And, I don't necessarily blame people for doing that. I think that is the biggest concern point for me on the defensive side of the ball. Now, for Stephens, there are a lot of different ways that, he can improve. Obviously, turning his head around for the ball is number one. He cannot locate the ball effectively. In the Bills, there's no more Stephon Diggs, right? There's no more number one wide receivers. No like Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, CeeDee Lamb, number one guy on that Bills offense. They traded for Amari Cooper, and they have Khalil Shakir, Mac Hollins, Keon Coleman, obviously the tight ends. The Bills have a plethora of offensive weapons that they can utilize against this Baltimore defense. And one thing I look at here, you want to talk about the conversions, is that the third down defense for Baltimore, while the Bills defense in that regard is worse, the Ravens aren't this top unit in that regard. They are 18th in the league, 39.8%. They give up on third down. This is going to come down to which defense can get off the field. It is. And that comes down to a couple of different things. I think penalties are going to play a big role in that. Obviously, when it comes to the referee crew, that conversation has been had about, what has to be done. Speaking of referee crews, if the Ravens do win and go on to Kansas City, that's going to be a whole different conversation if you watch that Kansas City and Houston game yesterday. And honestly, just a very brief side note, I have not seen a team complain about the refs like that post-game like Houston did, maybe ever. Every single player, it seemed like, talked about it, and I don't blame them. So obviously, you want to be in a situation where you're not putting the refs, you don't give the refs that power, essentially. You don't let them decide the outcome of the game. If there's a bad call and you're up by 15 points with 2 minutes to go, it's not going to impact the game. You don't want to put the refs in that situation, but obviously it doesn't excuse poor calls. Now, the Ravens have had games this year where they just cannot get out of their own way. And I'll be consistent in saying this. I think if the Ravens play their game and don't get in their own way, there's not a team that can beat them. But what happens is there's an 8-yard Derrick Henry run, and then you're 2nd and 2. But wait, there's a holding call. And all of a sudden you go from 2nd and 2 to 1st and 20, and it kills drives. It absolutely decimates them. And you're punting the ball back. You're giving, your opposing offense more opportunities. in time of possession, as I've talked about all week here, I was on this from the second, the Bills game ended and we knew the Ravens were playing the Bills. The Ravens held the ball for 40 minutes against Pittsburgh. The Bills held the ball for 41 minutes against the Broncos. The best way to limit a star quarterback's opportunities and stop him, slow him down, is don't let him on the field. Use time possession to your advantage. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean get away from what you want to do. Obviously, running the ball, controlling the clock, the Ravens should want to do that. You have Derrick Henry. But the passing game is also going to be really important to keep Buffalo on their toes. Obviously, using play action is going to be really important as well. So it's going to be up to guys like Rashad Bateman, Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. This is assuming that Zay Flowers does not play. But Buffalo is going to have to do that on their side of the ball as well with the guys I mentioned. And I think with James Cook, who in my opinion is one of the most underrated players in this league, especially with how he was talked about this season. He had a great year. And this Buffalo offensive line is one of the best units in the entire NFL. So the Ravens defensive front and defense will have to get very physical. Now, Baltimore's offensive line, we know what Roger Rosengarten did to TJ Watt last week, stifled him, did a great job. And I think that the guards played well. Tyler Linderbaum at the center position, obviously Ronnie Stanley, who's been healthy this year, which has been incredible for them. There were a lot of question marks coming into the year about this Ravens offensive line, and rightfully so. I expected this to be a little bit longer of a retooling process and have them be up to this level. But hey, credit to them. I'm here to give credit where it's due, and that offensive line has absolutely been exceeding my expectations for it. And I couldn't be happier about it because it all starts up front for an offense. If either one of these teams cannot create rushing lanes for their running back or clean pockets for their quarterback to be able to work through, it's going to be a long day for that offense. And I think that sometimes the Ravens, both offensively and defensively, can either start slow. It honestly feels like the script recently, and I'm not including the Pittsburgh game in this, obviously, but I'm talking regular season. It's like the Ravens don't score, or they start off very slow for like a quarter and a half, and the defense gives some momentum play to the offense, and it's history from that point on. And my saying is, if you give the Ravens a momentum play, it's going to be a bad rest of your day because the Ravens, I think, thrive off of momentum, and it's going to be tough. I mean, we'll talk about this more a bit in the final part of the show, but going on the road to Buffalo, hostile environment, one of the most hostile places to play in the league. Plus, then you got to go, if you win the game, to Kansas City the next week. It's going to be tough, but the Ravens, they're going in there to play the spoiler and obviously get revenge, if you want to call it that, for the game a couple years ago in Buffalo where the Ravens lost in the divisional round as well. So we're going to see how it all unfolds. I think, again, a really, really good game on the docket. And coming up, we'll get into some final predictions. We'll talk about that weather element too, because that has been getting major storylines for some reason. So be sure to stay tuned. A lot to get to here on Locked On Ravens. First, this show is brought to you by TurboTax. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes were waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting, wondering, and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Back here on Locked On Ravens, final segment. Game's getting closer and closer. Even as you're listening and watching this show, it's getting closer and closer. Maybe you're watching this after the game and you're here to tell me how right or wrong I was about my takes. That also is okay. But Ravens and Bills, divisional round. Appreciate everybody for being here, whether you're an everydayer and you listen every single day. If you're new to the show, welcome in. Hopefully you stay a while. And if you're somewhere in the middle, welcome back in. We're a 5-day-a-week Ravens podcast, plus more. We go live after every Ravens game, which, again, we'll be doing here after the fact. We'll be live on YouTube immediately, 15, 30 minutes max after the final snap. And then that'll be available right after to play back in video form and obviously in audio form as well. So hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for all your daily Ravens coverage. Let's talk about the weather. I don't know. This might just be breaking news, and I've kind of talked about this everywhere I've been on this week and here on this show. Do people not realize that Baltimore is not a tropical city, because the way that this is being talked about, it's like everybody thinks that this Ravens team is going to have a severe weather disadvantage because it's Buffalo. And I get it. Buffalo, it can be a whole crazy wind situation like we saw the last time these two teams faced off in the playoffs. It can get pretty crazy weather-wise with the cold, but they're not playing in Miami. This is not the Miami Dolphins coming up and playing Buffalo here and having to adjust, and you're in a warm weather climate. Yeah, Lamar doesn't like the cold. He's made it very evident. He's not a cold weather guy. I'm not either. So we have that in common. I'm a warm weather person through and through. I understand. But the notion that like Lamar can't play in the cold or doesn't play in the cold is false in general. He actually is not bad in the cold. I don't know where that narrative came from. The thing that impacts him more is rain and wind. That's been the thing that, in my opinion, has impacted Lamar more than just straight up cold. Like, yeah, it's going to be tough to play out there. It's going to be smash mouth physical football. You want to bring Derrick Henry into that equation? You don't want to, just me personally, I don't want to tackle Derrick Henry in that weather, but you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to do it if you want to win the game. So this is going to be a game where I think the more physical team wins, and the team that is more willing, has more willpower, is going to be able to get this job done. We know the Ravens are locked in. Lamar is locked in. He wants to win more than anything. That confidence, I think, is bled into the fan base. It certainly has had an impact on me and how I feel about this team, because it feels like Lamar is cool, calm, collected, even more so than last season. And it feels like the Ravens understand what the stakes are, and they understand how big of a game this is, because sometimes you don't. You think you understand it. You're like, yeah, this is the playoffs, this is the divisional round. Then you get there and you're like, whoa, and stuff kind of catches you off guard. I think that might have been what happened in the AFC Championship game last season. But the Ravens have been to their fair share of divisional games now. But guess what? So is Buffalo. And the narrative surrounding each of these teams, if they lose, each of these quarterbacks, if they lose, and it has been made very clear that Lamar is going to get more criticism for losing than Josh would if he loses. But it's still going to be a bunch of toxic conversation regardless. So I think that, look, in my opinion, the Ravens have a couple of key players that have to step up in this game, and I'm not talking like Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry. Like, we know those guys have to step up. I think Isaiah Likely has to have a huge game here. This could be a big Isaiah Likely game. I like the matchup. I feel like that could be, even if you want to split them out wide for a bit, but just using those heavy sets. And if the run game is working, using the play action, using motion, using the option plays, that's going to keep Buffalo on their toes. And as Todd Monken hopefully opens up this playbook more and more, which I think we saw last week against Pittsburgh, that's going to add a bunch of different new wrinkles to what this Ravens offense can do. I also think on the defensive side of the ball, I know where Darius Washington is everybody's popular pick, and certainly is an unsung hero of this defense, no doubt. But I think this has to be a big Odafe Owe game, personally, right? You cannot let Josh Allen sit back there. And if you're going to blitz him play after play, that's not the formula you want to use. Both Josh and Lamar are really good against the blitz. And if you send pressure and don't get there, both those guys will tear you apart. So it's about quick wins for the Baltimore defense. And I think, obviously, for how good this Bills offensive line is and the way that the Ravens offensive line is playing, might be hard to come by. And that's why I think whichever offensive line plays better is probably going to be the team that comes out on top in this one. So I like this game for Baltimore. It's going to be a tough game. I know a lot of people are very, very confident in the Ravens and are picking them by more than 10 points. I personally think it's going to be a lot closer than that. My final score, I've kind of been riding with it all week. I'm going to go 29-23 Ravens. I just feel like at the end of the day, the Ravens run game is going to be too overwhelming for the Bills defensive personnel. And it's not that they don't have talent, as I've said. I just think that the Bills cannot match what the Ravens have up front consistently. There will be moments where they stop it. There will be plays. There will be sequences. There will be drives where the Ravens offense is stopped and they're put back in second and long. But here's what I think the Ravens should do. Early on, if you can establish a ground game on first down, the Bills will have to start selling out for that. And then if the Bills want to have, because second and long situations, that can be one of the big things that gets an offense off the field and kills momentum. But if you throw the ball on first down and use play action on those first down plays, I think that could be good. Because sometimes the offensive mindset is let's just pick up 3, 4, 5 yards, get into a second and manageable, and then go from there. You have 2, and with the Ravens, sometimes it's 3 downs to get that done. But if there's an incompletion on 1st and 10, you get the 2nd and 10, that 2nd and long, and that can maybe throw you off a little bit. But again, Baltimore's offense has been very good at converting on 3rd down. You also cannot stall out in the red zone. This is the best red zone offense in the league with the Ravens. The Bills are number 2. These are 2 of the best red zone offenses. In fact, they are the top 2, as I said, red zone offenses in the NFL. The Ravens, in terms of their red zone defense, they are 12th. The Bills, their red zone defense, they are 16th. So 2 middle of the pack red zone defenses, but we do know the mindset and the mantra of this group is bend, don't break. And I think that's exactly the mindset you have to take into this game, because you can let Josh and that Bills offense get over the midfield line and get to the 30. Make Tyler Bass kick. Because my philosophy, a kick every possession, you win every game. This Ravens offense is too good. Now, unfortunately, they couldn't do that against Pittsburgh. Chris Boswell hit 6 field goals and they lost. But generally, this Ravens offense, especially with how they've been playing, if this is Tyler Bass kicking or punt, the punter comes out there and punts in every possession, there's no way, in my opinion, that the Ravens lose that game. Obviously, I guess there is technically a way. It's not impossible. That is a big formula for success. So I am going 29-23. I think the Ravens take care of business. They advance to the AFC Championship game, and hopefully after the final whistle, we are talking about a big Ravens victory. But that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. On the way out, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. As I mentioned, we'll be back here later tonight talking about what happened in that Ravens and Bills game. So I'm hoping it's a good one for Baltimore. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here later today on Locked On Ravens.